What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Friday, September 2nd, 2016. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Heading into the Labor Day weekend. And a quick program note, Monday, the overworked and underpaid staff at Republic Broadcasting is taking the day off, so it's going to be replays. We'll be back live on Tuesday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, and sadly, our toll-free number, there's still an issue. Vonage is not able to get it working, and the area code 512 numbers are posted to the front of WhatReallyHappened.com for you to reference, but one more time, we'll give them to you. 512-716-1603, 512-716-1883, and 512-716-1897. And a quick reminder that the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 of our broadcast today, assuming that nothing else goes wrong here. Now, if you're watching the corporate media, you understand Tropical Storm Hermione is now making its way up the east coast of the United States of America and causing a lot of grief there. Here on Oahu, we're just starting to see the leading edge of that system around Hurricane Lester, and it is still a hurricane. Winds at the eye are at 110 miles an hour. It's a nasty, nasty storm. It's actually very powerful. Now, the good news for us is the predicted track of the eye has shifted northward, and so we'll definitely be in the storm system. We'll have lightning and thunder, which I kind of enjoy, and Claire doesn't. But we're not looking at serious, serious damage to the inhabited islands of the Hawaiian archipelago. We're kind of little tiny things here. The hurricanes keep missing us. When you live on a continent like North America, it's going to hit somewhere. And so, obviously, a lot of problems going on for the people there along the eastern seaboard. And I've been through some of those eastern seaboard hurricanes. I've actually been through the eye of a hurricane when I was a kid in New Hampshire. It's a very, very strange experience to go through. All right, so let's get into the news here because we've got a lot of stuff to cover today. The FBI has released what they're calling a summary of its interviews related to the Clinton email server investigation. And you need to realize how far removed you are from the facts in this case. Hillary was not under oath. The FBI did not record the interview. They did not make a transcript. They just took down notes. And now the FBI is releasing a summary of those notes. And anybody who thinks there are really any incriminating facts still there, well, I've got some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. And even this summary is heavily redacted. It's a 58-page summary. Large sections are redacted. There's stuff in there they don't want you to know. Now remember, back in July, FBI Director James Comey announced he did not recommend charging Clinton with willfully mishandling classified information. And he called her extremely careless, but he said no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case because reasonable prosecutors don't want to wind up in Fort Marcy Park. But either James Comey does not understand the law or he is simply hoping that you don't, because under Title 18, Section 793, negligence in revealing classified information is a crime punishable by 10 years in prison. So, why this very tender treatment of Hillary Clinton? And I'm going to go down what's really behind all of this that we're seeing for the last almost 3 decades here. We need to start with that giant slush fund called the Clinton Foundation. Now, one of its many donors was HSBC. Not too long ago, HSBC was caught laundering drug money. They got a sweetheart deal from the U.S. Attorney for New York for a deferred prosecution in exchange for a wrist slap fine. That U.S. Attorney for New York was Loretta Lynch, who is now our Attorney General. And on the board of HSBC, while that drug money laundering was going on, was James Comey, who's now head of the FBI. And so what is going on in this country, we've talked about this before, this is a repeat of the corruption that happened during Prohibition. when those who trafficked in illicit substances had enough money to literally buy their way into the highest levels of the U.S. government. Now, old Joe Kennedy made the Kennedy family fortune as a rum runner. His son, John F. Kennedy, was president. Another of his sons, Robert Kennedy, was on his way to the White House when he was assassinated. Ted Kennedy served in Congress and would have run for the White House had it not been for Chappaquiddick. Now, the rise of the Bush and Clinton duopoly tracks back to that CIA gun-running operation of the 1980s. Illegal under the Bolin Amendment and the Logan Act that smuggled untraceable guns from Arkansas under then-Governor Bill Clinton to the Nicaraguan Contras. All of this was funded by vast amounts of cocaine smuggled back into the United States and sold to our children, with the money being laundered through various land flips, savings and loans, and the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, created by Webb Hubbell and signed into law by Bill Clinton. You all know this as the Iran-Contra scandal. But the part about the drug running, that was withheld from the public. They focused on the guns and Iran and the rest of it, but anytime they got near the drug running, Hawaii Senator Daniel Inouye would shout executive session, they'd slam the doors, kick out the press and the public. Because what they didn't want you to know was that the biggest drug smuggler in the country is the country. All right, we got to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. We're talking about the latest developments in the email scandal. The FBI has released a summary of their interview with Hillary Clinton. It's heavily, heavily redacted, which means it's sanitized. That's the word they should be using. It's sanitized out there. And we're talking about how we're seeing a repeat of prohibition in this country in terms of the corrupting influence of banned substances, the politics of contraband. That's what we're seeing going on here. Now, everyone involved in this CIA drug-running operation, gun and drug-running operation, made huge amounts of money, enough to buy their way to the highest levels of the U.S. government. It's replaying the whole Kennedy dynasty, and our nation has suffered the consequences of this corruption for 3 decades. Do you understand it yet? How drug corruption has completely penetrated the top levels of our federal government and our state governments, let's be honest. They're not immune to this thing. Now, there are some things that have come out from this FBI report. I think Comey is trying to walk a very fine line between not dying suddenly and mysteriously and not completely discrediting the FBI under his watch. And they have come out and admitted they found ample evidence that Hillary Clinton violated Federal Records Acts, that she set up her private email server, paid Brian Pagliani under the table, because she didn't want people to know it was out there, but she wanted control over sensitive messages. Now remember, everything done by a government employee is a public record, unless it's specifically classified for military purposes. But Hillary wanted control over messages she didn't even want the government to have available, out of concern that it might be a target of a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. And that's what's going on. And it gets even weirder than that, because apparently Hillary Clinton is one of those people. She's got lots and lots of money, and she always wants the latest and the greatest. And contrary to her story about just wanting to have the one little BlackBerry, she apparently went through a lot of hardware while she was Secretary of State. She was constantly updating her cell phones. She went through 5 iPads, and here's where it gets alarming. Nobody knew where all that old equipment went. It should have been destroyed. But Huma Abedin and Monica Hanley indicated that the whereabouts of Hillary's used devices were basically unknown. They didn't know where they went after Hillary got a new device. That's reckless and careless and negligent handling of classified information. Now, as you know, we've actually got a caller here on the line here. John in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How are you doing? Hope you're having a good day.
Well, considering we're under the edge of a hurricane here.
Yes. But I have some more topics, well, not topics, but some more information on that not information, but some topics that are related to that.
Yes.
First, about the Philippines. Do you think the president going after, because he was always going after the drugs ever since he was a mayor and then governor, and now since he's the president, he's going after the top echelon of the drug people. And you even saw the U.S. ambassador try to tell him, like, is this like human rights? You're over here killing, drug pushers and everything. He came back at him saying, well, look at your police just shooting innocent people in the street. And that was a good one because it made him sit down, the U.S. ambassador. But there's another good, there was a good report by France 24, and it was about the Guatemalan Civil War, and it's about the whole families, I guess over 55,000 people went missing over there, and they're just finding the mass graves and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that was funded by the CIA, but then there's another report that was remade by, I want to say it's on YouTube too, and it's Telesu English, and it has another report saying that Coca-Cola funded death squads in the Colombian Civil War.
Well, I hadn't heard that last one, but we're kind of starting to wander far afield from the topic at hand, which is the drug corruption going on here in the United States. And you need to understand...
But doesn't that tie in?
Hang on. And there's nothing new about that. Okay? Governments around the world have always been tinkering with banned substances for the profitability. Great Britain actually fought a war against China over Britain's supposed right to sell opium to the Chinese people, which led to the whole thing about the opium dens and actually contributed to the eventual downfall of the imperial court and the takeover by the communists. The Skull and Bones fraternity at Yale University was originally funded from opium money. Now, at the time, it was a legal crop in the United States because the opium poppies were being grown here and sold to Britain to sell to China. And that's one of the reasons why on Veterans Day, they have these little symbolic poppies representing that deep sleep of death. It's just a part of our culture. Then you had the CIA running Air America out of Vietnam, bringing heroin into the United States of America, cocaine during the Iran-Contra scandal, and ever since the U.S. went into Afghanistan, Afghani heroin is flowing into the streets of America again. And we have photos of U.S. and coalition forces guarding and protecting the opium poppies and transshipping the sacks of the raw opium. Now, when Afghanistan was still under the Taliban, they had ended drug production. And they had some very extreme methods, the way the Philippines are now starting to do. If you were caught with an opium poppy, they'd cut your hand off. And it may sound brutal. It did work.
From all the points that you have made, do you think the Philippines has the right idea then?
There are a lot of reasons to question the Philippine approach in terms of the possibility of false positives and identifying innocent people and killing them. Obviously, there's an issue there. But obviously, the Philippines has been pushed to the point of desperation by the drug corruption. And we have...
Mexico did the same thing too, right?
Yeah.
In the little Mexican towns and cities, the people, not the government, the people kicked out their own police,
Oh, yeah, because the police were completely corrupted by it. And here we have the U.S. government arming the Mexican drug cartels with military weapons. At the same time, they insist that we, the law-abiding American citizens, are not allowed to have these same guns. And it tells you whose side... It tells you whose side the U.S. government is on. They're on the side of the drug criminals, whether it's the Mexican cartels or the opium growers in Afghanistan. It's poisoned our country, and for decade after decade after decade.
And then that's the scary part right there, you said about those guns, because I live on a border town, and I'm wondering, could you see the same kind of violence, since they have military-grade stuff, and they go over there in Mexico, they blow up houses with rocket launchers, if you're not doing, it's like, the whole protective, pay for protection or something bad's going to happen to you.
Plata y plomo. Plata y plomo, letter silver.
Yeah, plata y plomo, and that's the real scary thing right there, and, how are we going to, I guess, make sure nothing happens to just regular, ordinary business people and civilians who don't. Because that's the problem in Mexico. Ever since the CIA gave them drugs, the lawlessness just sprang out of control, and then it was just everyday people, going to work and owning businesses getting kidnapped and held for ransom and stuff like that. There wasn't even people involved in the drug trade. And that's something that's not being reported, is that just the everyday citizen being just picked up from the street because they have stuff, they have stuff that could be ransomed, And then the interrogations of some of, especially the Zetas, the Senador would ask them, how do you know these people? How do you know who to capture? And they say, well, if they have a lot of food and if they have a lot of things that most people don't have, then we go and take them and extort them. And then that's really what terrifies me the most. There's not that much law enforcement like it is.
Well, the law enforcement, has gone over to the other side. And when I was going to college at Cal State Fullerton, the best drug connection in town was a California highway patrolman, and he would confiscate drugs from the dealers and then let them go, and then he'd resell the drugs out of the back of his squad car. And then he quit the highway patrol and he bought himself a Radio Shack. I mean, that's how pervasive all of this stuff is.
I believe it, because in those two stories I told you, especially the Guatemalan one, these people were just labor leaders. They were just labor leaders. That's all they were.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get better conditions. And when you really look at the drug organization and then the government organization, they don't care about their workers at all.
No, they don't. I mean, when you have a government consisting of organized crime, whether it's alcohol or opium or cocaine, they're all there for themselves. They're there for the wealth and the power. And no, they don't care about the people. The people are just the customers. I'll make them addicts. We'll make them addicts to opium. We'll make them addicts to cocaine. We'll make them addicts to antidepressants. We'll make them addicts to whatever all else. It's all about sucking the money out of the population to make themselves incredibly wealthy. And we've seen it in country after country after country, and countries do get driven to the point of taking desperate steps to try and get themselves out of that problem. Over in Sicily, their attempt to get rid of organized crime that had penetrated their government, I mean, it was just brutal. Prosecutors were being machine gunned down in the streets, and it could get that ugly here as well.
You think that's why you see them trying to come down so hard on those 28 states that have marijuana legal and trying to push all this like, oh, there was THC in the water supply of Colorado and everything, and trying to make it seem like THC is real bad, but then more scientific evidence doesn't have that. It's really like...
Well, first of all, a big part of the push to keep marijuana illegal is coming out of the tobacco and alcohol industries. And as far as the drug trade is concerned, they're down on marijuana and meth because those can be made and grown at home. And that cuts into the profits of drugs that have to be brought across the border through these protected channels. And the CIA has had a protected smuggling channel going all the way back to Ronald Reagan and his Attorney General, William French Smith, who literally wrote up the laws to say that if the CIA was involved in drug smuggling, they were not required to report it to the DEA. And that was called the CIA's license to smuggle. And his assistant, William French Smith's assistant at that time, was the young Kenneth Starr. So when all of this Iran-Contra and stained blue dress and everything started to blow up and risk exposure of another government-sanctioned drug smuggling operation, they got Ken Starr to come on in and distract us all with a stained blue dress to protect that most dark secret. But that's really what's at the heart of it, is we have a government that has been literally taken over by drug lords. American drug lords, not those sweaty South Americans that Hollywood tells you drug lords are. We're talking about the ones that live and work here in the United States of America.
How are you going to change the police? Like, I think the police needs to be changed, though, because if they're not going to uphold the law and arrest the people that should be arrested, but only go after, the little small-town drug dealers, or just the law-abiding
the whole. Okay, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercial. But our entire justice system is upside down. The guilty, like Hillary, are being protected. Innocent, law-abiding citizens are being plundered with the civil forfeiture laws and outright murdered by the police. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and getting on back to that FBI report, the summary of the notes of the conversation with Hillary, not under oath, and not recorded. There are some things coming on out. One of the Hillary Clinton campaign's major issues is the Title 18 violations, and whether she knew she was doing wrong or not. And not too long ago, the Hillary Clinton campaign tried to float this trial balloon that actually Hillary and her aides had been so busy, they hadn't actually gotten around to going to the briefing on how to handle classified information. Now, that fell apart because, as anybody who's ever been exposed to classified information will tell you, you have to sit through that briefing first before you get your security clearance, before you're allowed to even look at the documents. It just doesn't work. And there was a public interest group that has filed a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit with the State Department to get all the records proving that Hillary Clinton was, in fact, fully informed about the laws that govern the handling of classified information. So now the Hillary campaign has come out with a new dodge that Hillary Clinton couldn't recall the security briefings because of her concussion. They're out there trying to push this idea. She didn't know she was doing wrong. So elect her as president. Don't throw her in prison because she didn't know she was doing wrong. Now, if you go into court and you tell a judge, I didn't know it was wrong to do this, what's the judge always going to say? Ignorance of the law is no excuse. And that has to apply to Hillary. But when you look at all the stuff that has come on out, that they're putting out there to defend Hillary Clinton from criminal prosecution for Title 18 violations, it's not creating a very positive image of Hillary herself. You have Hillary is careless and negligent. That's from the FBI. She gets confused a lot. That's from Huma Abedin. She gets brain short circuits. Hillary said that herself. And now we can add forgetful to the list because of the concussion. Oh, yeah, that's exactly the sort of person we want holding the keys to the nuclear weapons. We're on the verge of war, and Hillary's saying, I had those keys around here somewhere. I know I had those. I don't know where they went. I mean, they're creating an image of somebody who is just absolutely mentally incapable of actually being the president. Of course, to Hillary's backers, they don't really care because puppets aren't supposed to have working brains anyway. Now, getting on to the corruption over there at the Clinton Foundation, Judicial Watch has released another 510 pages of State Department emails, and yet more inconvenient facts are piling up for Hillary. And they have found these email exchanges where Bill Clinton was pushing meetings with foundation donors. And here's where it gets really out there. This absolutely nails that the State Department and the Clinton Foundation were working hand in glove, because some of the Clinton Foundation executives requested diplomatic passports. Now, diplomatic passports are only issued to State Department employees, and yet Clinton Foundation executives were requesting them. So you think about that one for a while. Now, everybody was kind of focused on Donald Trump's meeting with the President of Mexico and his immigration speech, which he came off very well. He was looking presidential in Mexico. He came across as presidential in that speech. But Hillary also made a speech that the corporate media is kind of ignoring, because this was a speech she made to the American Legion, in which she basically came on out and said, we're going to go to war, Russia's the enemy, we've got to deal with Russia. And the corporate media, of course, is ignoring that, because they understand that you, the American people, are sick and tired of war, and very leery of war with a major power that we might actually be defeated by. Now, Marine Le Pen, France's National Front party leader, is out there saying, yes, if Hillary Clinton gets that White House, it will be World War III. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Hillary Clinton and Nigel Farage are having a war of words. And Nigel Farage is out there saying that Hillary Clinton, as president, will bring stability of failure, because Hillary has made no secret of the fact that she will continue the policies that we have seen going back all the way to George Herbert Walker Bush. There's no possibility of change whatsoever. And remember what Susan Sarandon said: a vote for Hillary Clinton is a vote for the status quo. The status quo is not working. And that is certainly true. Farage then went on to say that Hillary Clinton has lost the plot, which is a British expression meaning you've gone crazy, claiming that UKIP is funded by Russia. See, Hillary's entire campaign right now is built on bashing Russia and bringing back the Cold War or a hot war. Because all of her backers are thinking that if they can get a Cold War going, it'll be good for business. It'll be good for their business. Making weapons that cost a lot of money that hopefully you're never actually going to have to use. But for those of us old enough to remember the original Cold War, which was just as phony as what Hillary is doing, the defense contractors were very rich, their pet Congress critters were very rich, and the rest of us were all impoverished. Huge amounts of tax money taken away to defend us against the communists. And this actually goes all the way back to the end of World War II, where after the dust had settled there, and the U.S. government literally set it as a policy that they were going to start this campaign of hostility against Russia in order to justify continued military spending. Because once World War II was over, everybody said, oh, great, we can start spending our tax dollars on schools and hospitals and better roads and factories and the rest of it. And the defense contractors said, heck, no, we got to keep this thing going somehow. And they went on out to Hollywood, that had done yeoman's service with propaganda movies bashing the Japanese and the Germans for World War II. And they went on out and said, now you got to make movies that are bashing the Russians. And a lot of people in Hollywood said, wait a minute, Russia, they're our allies. They helped us, win this war. And those people in Hollywood who refused to create propaganda to demonize Russia unjustly all eventually became victims of Senator Joseph McCarthy and his House Un-American Activities Committee. Their careers were destroyed. And the threat from Russia back then was no more real than it is right now. They're trying to just replay this, hoping that we won't remember. We've been down this scam before. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That's where we are right now. Now, Tim Kaine is in very hot water with the Hillary Clinton campaign, because apparently during a recent speech, he actually came out and said he didn't see anything wrong with full disclosure of finances and health and entanglements that might be a risk to national security. Now, I think he was thinking about going after Donald Trump. We want to see your finances. We want to see your medical records and what compromising connections you have. But, of course, everybody was out there saying, well, Hillary Clinton has failed miserably on all three of those. And so Kaine is in a lot of trouble. On the other hand, maybe he's already dreaming of that Oval Office. Because looking at Hillary's very obvious continued deterioration, Tim Kaine is probably thinking all he's got to do is sit quietly and patiently, and if Hillary steals the White House, he'll get to just move into that Oval Office somewhere down the road. Now, we have seen the corporate media trying to find some way to demonize Donald Trump in the eyes of the public. And the Washington Post literally detailed something like 30 of their prostitutes to go on out and find dirt on Donald Trump. And all they were able to find was that Donald Trump's father was arrested at a KKK riot 9 years before Donald Trump was born. And they couldn't even establish that Donald Trump's father was part of the KKK. He just got caught up, and he got arrested, and he was released almost immediately. And that's the best they could find. So they're trying to make things up, and they've tried to make a big deal over the fact that Melania Trump was a nude model. Oh, my goodness, how could she possibly do that? Well, it's not like back then when she was working as a professional model, and a very successful one, It's not like she knew she was ultimately going to be potentially First Lady. So that really didn't take any traction, because she does look good. Let's be honest. She does look very, very good. Then they tried to come up with this bogus lawsuit claiming that Donald Trump had raped an underage girl, and that one fell apart because in the court documents, it turned out the address given for the plaintiff was a boarded-up house, the phone number given was disconnected and had previously belonged to a dentist. In other words, the plaintiff, who was supposed to be this victim of underage rape, didn't exist. And they tried that in California, and they tried it again in New Jersey, and that went nowhere. So the latest one is a story that came out in the Daily Mail, and Webster Tarpley, unfortunately, got caught up in this as well. And they were talking about allegations made in a book currently for sale on Amazon about how the modeling agency Melania Trump had worked for also operated as an escort agency for wealthy clients. Ooh. And was all sold with a very sensational headline, naked photo shoots and troubling questions about, was she a sex worker? Blah, 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 blah. Now, a little bit of history. There's an old story about Lyndon Johnson from early in his career when he was running for Congress, and he ordered one of his aides to plant a phony story that Johnson's opponent had sex with farm animals. And the aide replied, the story is not true. And Lyndon Johnson said, it doesn't matter. We're just going to force him to deny it in public. And Democrats think like that. Now, this whole story about Melania being potentially a sex worker was obviously planned to try and put the Trumps on the defensive and deny that it was true. Melania has now sued for huge amounts of money, and I hope she wins. I'm sorry that Tarpley got caught up in this. But they're trying to tarnish her image. Actually, I think it's going to backfire. Because, after all, who's going to pay to have sex with Hillary at this point? Let's be honest. Melania Trump is going to be the hottest first lady in the nation's history. And yes, Hillary Clinton is still hot, but in her case, it comes in flashes. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Sean in North Carolina. Sean, aloha. Welcome to the show. How's the weather over there?
It's raining. Definitely, it's been raining all day.
Yes.
I guess the remnants from this hurricane.
Yes.
Flooding all around. I have a question about the polls. There's a huge difference between what the independent media reports versus CNN and all the...
You noticed that, did you?
Yes. And my question in that lies in Donald Trump himself, because when you hear him talk, he tends to, or he makes it sound like he's going by their numbers. And wouldn't you think, especially when he says this is a race between not him and Hillary, but him and the mainstream media, basically, wouldn't he want to expose their lies if they're lying about the polls? Well, I just don't understand why he goes by their numbers instead of what accurate polls are showing that.
Well, Donald Trump is having to live with the corporate media right now, and he's having to sort of not offend them too much. If he were to come on out and say, look, we've got all these other polls that I'm way, way ahead, the media would say, oh, well, Donald Trump is not dealing with reality. How dare you, impugn our reputation here and so forth. But in his private communications to his supporters, through emails and his Twitter feed and Facebook, he is talking about those other polls in the independent media that have him way, way ahead. So he's walking a very fine line. He doesn't want to directly confront the media on their fraud, because that will just, further encourage the media to just come on out with more falsehoods about him. Everybody's trying to, they're thinking about public perception, because all politics is perception, and he's trying to manage that here.
Well, I don't see how they, how anybody can believe them when all they do is belittle him and praise her. I mean, it is so obvious.
Well, it is very obvious, and even the corporate media is understanding. There have even been recent columns about how the corporate media is shredding its own credibility with the American people with all of this, and it will take them decades, if ever, to recover. This election could definitely see the transition where the independent media, a truly independent, objective media, comes to the fore in the American society. And that corporate-owned media is basically going to be relegated to the same social level as AM radio.
Do you have any worries about this United Nations takeover of the Internet as far as independent media goes? Because it sounds like if they get control of it, if they don't like what you're saying, they're just going to shut you down.
Well, first of all, attempts to shut down the net have already been tried. China tried to do it, and it basically failed. All that's really been turned over to the United Nations is management of the IP address space. And we're getting more indications about trying to censor the Internet coming out of George Soros than we are out of the United Nations.
Okay, that's all I got for you. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now, on that same subject of the polls, very interesting article. This was actually reported in Fox News, okay, where they're talking about their polling methodology. Now, if you go on out and you look at the actual rallies of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, the ratio of people showing up is anywhere between 20-1 to 100-1 in favor of Donald Trump. Now, a true random sampling of Americans would match that ratio. But somehow, Fox News is out there polling 2.5 times more Clinton supporters than Trump supporters. It's push polling. They're going on out and they're talking to people who will give them the results that they want ahead of time. Now, we've talked a lot about this documentary, Hacking Democracy, and apparently there's been a big push, supposedly by HBO, to get all copies of it removed from the Internet. And, of course, every time one gets taken down, 3 more copies get put up. But it is an important documentary because it does show our elections are completely untrustworthy. Now, Barack Obama has a major task ahead of him. He's got to figure out some way with this Department of Homeland Security takeover and Orwellizing the documentaries and the books to the contrary to convince America that the November election is going to be fair and honest and above board. And, of course, he's going to fail miserably because nobody trusts Barack Obama. Nobody trusts the Department of Homeland Security. We know election fraud is epidemic in this country. And I encourage you to go on out and actually buy the DVD for Hacking Democracy. It's a good investment. I have a copy in my library that I'm constantly showing to other people. And getting on back to this disparity between the corporate media and independent media. NBC is still out there insisting Hillary Clinton is 6 points ahead, although they're quoting a poll from 3 weeks ago. We reran our poll. If the election were held today, who would you vote for? Donald Trump, 97%. Hillary Clinton, 3%. Her numbers are even worse than the last time we ran this. And let's go ahead and take a phone call, and then I got a really cool story for the rest of this hour. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Fahrenheit 451, starring Barack Obama, co-starring Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
I hope people know what Fahrenheit 451 was.
Oh, I'm sure that they do. I mean, it's a wonderful book here, and it was made into a really good movie. And one of the great pleasures of my career in film is I actually got to spend a lot of time with Ray Bradbury. He came out to our college class, and then he was a script consultant on the TV movie remake of Valley of the Dolls. Then he was producing his own stage play from his novel The Wonderful Ice Cream Suit. And we actually smuggled him into the Magic Castle, even though he was in violation of the dress code one night, so we got to go up there. He was a very, very, very nice guy. And he wrote a lot of really good science fiction.
Mike, with the previous caller, this is not about Hillary versus Trump. This is globalism versus nationalism. That's why Nigel Farage was at the Trump rally. This is a battle. People need to realize this. This is not like a localized event. It's happening all over the world.
Oh, this has global implications. I mean, there are so many things at stake here. It's nationalism versus globalism. It's an entrenched, corrupted establishment against ordinary people. It's about whether or not we really still are a republic with democratically chosen leaders or if we've descended into a complete dictatorship. If Hillary steals that White House, that's the end of the United States as we have all known it.
Oh, yeah, this is it. I mean, I just want to keep telling people, how many wars has Donald Trump gotten us into? How much corruption has Donald Trump did? Now, times versus Hillary Clinton. How many wars have Hillary Clinton got us into? How much trouble have we been in? And her corruption. I mean, it's obvious, so easy to figure out, like, you know, who's the candidate. I'm not saying Donald Trump's perfect, but I mean, the alternative is horrendous, Mike, at this point. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is it, though. This is the last chance. If we don't win this, globalism's going to win, I think.
I don't know that globalism is going to win because there's a pushback against globalism all over Europe, all over the world. I think it's already a failed policy, no matter how much money George Soros pours into it. But this election is definitely going to decide whether the United States of America, as we all think it is supposed to be, is over and done with. And that's why it is so important to get out there and get involved in the remaining time that we have. I mean, we're literally talking about the existence of our country and a potential world war. All right, Dustin, going to let you go here. Got to take a break for commercials. Be back in just a couple minutes. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And on the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com, we have a video of George Soros being interviewed in which he says Donald Trump will win the popular vote by a landslide, but Hillary is still going to be the president. And the interviewer said, so it's a done deal, and Soros said yes. Now, I've already gotten an email saying, oh, you're just going to discourage the Trump voters. No, I am hoping to anger them. Grab a copy of this video, because if Donald Trump wins the popular vote in a landslide and they still try and give us Hillary, at that point, we will understand we've been living in this dictatorship, that the drug lords are ruling this nation, and I have a zero-tolerance policy for non-democratic processes. If the government cannot prove the accuracy and fairness and honesty of the election, we don't have to obey them, pay their bills, or sacrifice our children. If Donald Trump wins the popular vote and they pull some kind of a fast one to steal it from him, well, that could trigger a revolution, could trigger a military coup. And I'm certainly not going to get in the way of either one. All right, let's grab a phone call. Alex in Colorado, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike?
Yes.
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Fine.
Okay. So, that was pretty cool. I had no idea that you were friends with Ray Bradbury and you walked around with him.
He was a
nice
guy. Very nice guy. And that was kind of one of the weird things about Hollywood. Everybody I met was either the most wonderful person you'd want to be with or a total jerk. There was very little in between.
Yeah, no, you're some computer animation teacher. I had no idea, But so concerning the Hillary Clinton FBI email investigation,
yes,
there's just a treasure trove of stuff to be found in there. Of course, it's a lot of her saying, oh, I don't know, I don't recall, which just makes her look horrible. But there's a really funny quote I just wanted to share with you where it says that it's at the bottom of page 9. It says Avedon and Hanley. Huma Avedon indicated the whereabouts of Clinton's devices would frequently become unknown once she transitioned to a new device. Cooper, who I guess is, I don't know exactly who it is, I guess he's someone involved, did recall 2 instances where he destroyed Clinton's old mobile devices by breaking them in half or hitting them with a hammer.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's 2 out of maybe a dozen or more. We know she went through at least 5 iPads, and even if you break a phone in 2, or you hit it with a hammer, unless you get that memory chip, because remember, those are all non-volatile memories. They hold the information even without electricity, and somebody could still recover the information from it.
Yeah, exactly. And then it says, oh, the devices would frequently become unknown. Okay, well, she just lost them. So I guess that's a possibility.
Maybe they were sold on eBay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where WikiLeaks is buying all this stuff. Oh, another Hillary phone. Let's buy that.
Exactly. Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate what you do.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to take a break for station identification. Back with hour number 2 after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And another piece of information that has surfaced in the FBI's summary is that apparently Hillary Clinton went on a deletion binge, if you will, after the New York Times ran the story that she was using a private email server while Secretary of State. Now, Hillary told the FBI that somebody did this by mistake. It was a simple error, of course, that all of this stuff was gone, her archived mailbox vanished from her server and the exported files. So it looks worse. If the corporate media would actually report on this, Hillary would be toast, but the corporate media's job is to make you just think that she is the blue fairy. We're finding out now the total number of missing and unaccounted devices is 20. We're going to take a phone call now. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
Doing fine.
Mike, let me say something. They tried this, what Soros said. First of all, I don't know why Soros is even walking around a free man. I remember some years ago I heard that Vladimir Putin had a warrant out for his arrest warrant out for him. I wish he'd carry it out if he did, and get this slime ball into custody where he belongs. Maybe even execute. I think they should just take him to the nearest gallows and hang him. But that's besides the point. If they try to do this, Mike, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. Like you said, the least that could happen is a military coup, which probably would be the best thing, because at least then this country might come together. But I'm afraid the top generals have been so badly purged that that's not going to happen. I think what's going to happen is you're going to have a civil war against different sections of the country are going to rebel. And let me tell the liberals in the Northeast and places like that, in the coastal areas of California, you will not beat Middle America if it comes to a war. You guys most of you have never been in the military. Most of you don't even know how to handle a gun. You look at a gun, you're going to be scared. You're going to think the thing is going to shoot itself. Okay? Go off itself. Right? You'll have no chance. You will lose. Let them understand. I hope these people understand that. You will not dominate this country. We will get our freedom back. We will not let you do this to us. It just won't happen. The country is going to split apart if that happens. And if they try to stop it, if they try to use force to try to keep it together, it won't be like the old Civil War, because in the old Civil War, the North was at least was on the side of, on the good side, because they were going against.
Well, hold it. Okay, the real issue of the Civil War, the South seceded because the federal government was arrogating to itself powers not authorized by the Constitution. Lincoln just exploited the slavery issue to sucker the people in the North into invading the South. So it wasn't a good war. Now, as far as what Soros is doing here, it's leading to a crisis. And I agree that an armed rebellion in this country is going to be a horrible, horrible mistake. But you need to understand the federal government is preparing to fight the last Civil War, stocking up on guns, trying to take our guns away. This revolution is being fought and it's being won with keyboards and information, not with bombs and bullets. Violence is only going to work to the advantage of the federal government and the rising tyranny. But an educated populace can bring all of this down. That's what happened to the Soviet Union. When the Soviet people used fax machines to educate themselves to what their government was really doing, and eventually the government just ceased being able to function and fell apart.
I agree with you, but if it comes to the fact that we can't even rely on our democratic institutions anymore, that we legitimately get a man like Donald Trump in as president, and then they try to pull some shenanigans, there's no way he could lose the what do you call the electoral vote?
The Electoral College. Well, Soros. Okay, Soros in this interview was actually out there saying that ultimately the Electoral College could simply decide to ignore the popular vote, which I think would be an extraordinarily dangerous thing for them to do. And there has been, I think, 2 instances in U.S. history where the Electoral College threw the presidency to the person who lost the popular vote, but it was the margin was very, very thin. You weren't dealing with a landslide mandate from the people.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but if
what does he mean? In other words, like the Gore Bush vote, or does he mean that they get the majority of the votes, period, and then the Electoral College people decide, well, you know what, we're going to flip it over to Hillary anyway because we don't like Trump, we don't trust him. Is that what you're talking about?
No. Well, first of all, what happened with Bush and Gore in 2000, the Electoral College was a footnote on that because it was thrown to George Bush by the United States Supreme Court, who then added on their decision that particular Supreme Court decision could never be used as a precedent in any future litigations, which was a dead giveaway that it was a pure political hatchet job. Now, I'm talking about, I think this was like back in the 1800s, where the Electoral College reversed the popular vote, but the candidates involved were like neck and neck. One had 50%, the other one had 51%, and the Electoral College threw it the other way, and there were allegations of bribery. But if you're dealing with Donald Trump, who's got 70 to 80% of the popular vote, I think the Electoral College, just out of their own sense of personal safety, wouldn't dare reverse that landslide. Okay, we got to take. We got.
It would be almost impossible. It would be almost impossible to have the her to get enough states if he wins in a landslide on a popular vote. It just is.
Well, Soros has a different opinion on that. We need to take a moment here to do a shout out to our honor affiliates who are rejoining the network. We're talking about this video of George Soros admitting Donald Trump is going to win the popular vote in a landslide, but he's still out there suggesting that the Electoral College or some other mechanism could put Hillary in the White House. And I think at the very least that would result in the American people just choosing not to even listen to the federal government any longer. And other people are saying something even more violent could happen.
I think my own opinion is either 2 things. And the best thing would be the military takes control and says, you know what, we're going to remove this government for the time being and then we're going to hold new elections. That would probably be the best of a bad lot. The other thing is I believe the country would split up and we'd have a civil war. And by the way, the guy that's always being made to look like the bad guy, like Glenn Beck, makes him look like one of the worst villains in the world. I don't think I've seen him I've heard him on interviews like on Red Eye Radio, this guy like named Dugan.
Yeah.
Dugan basically says that this country is going to split up. But that's not his fault, and it's not Russia's fault. It's our own fault that that happened.
It is. But the idea of the nation actually splitting up and balkanizing goes all the way back to the 1990s, where there was a group called the Western States Coalition that was looking at the then less than $6 trillion national debt and saying this is unacceptable. And they tried to get a resolution passed in 3/4 of the state legislatures that when the national debt went over $6 trillion, the federal government was dissolved. Unfortunately, they came up short on that one. But we could see Alaska and Hawaii go back to being independent nations. We could see the Western States Coalition break off. The original Northeastern money elite intellectuals and the original Confederacy could go their own way. As far as a military coup, I'm not 100% on board with that, but I will mention that most of the military people I know, and I know a lot because I live in Hawaii and we've got this highest per capita density of military of any state in the Union, they all tend to be strict constitutionalists. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and so I would be willing to sit back and give them the benefit of the doubt for a little while.
But I've always thought since the Congress has not done its job with Obama, it refuses to do what it should do, and that they could have impeached him many different times, that the military should have taken control already. because this president is out of control. He has violated the Constitution time and time again, trying to, push his, illegal executive orders. And I've always thought that if the Congress doesn't have the guts to do what it should be and impeach this imposter, that the military should have done their job then at that point and removed Obama by arresting for treason.
Okay, well, let me play the other side of that for you, because people who are in the military, they don't get promotion unless there's a conflict out there. In fact, if you go back and you remember the original movie of MASH, not the TV series, and there was the actor who played the colonel of that whole base, and he began every speech with this thing in the dark days before Pearl Harbor. And it didn't really make a lot of sense. And then I got to talk with him on another project, and he said the subtext there, and there was exposition in the screenplay, but it got edited out, was the fact that he didn't get promoted to colonel until there was a war in Korea. And so for a lot of the higher-level military people, they actually would welcome a war president and a war Congress, because it's more opportunities for advancement and more money for them, and plus all the double dipping with these defense contractors, huge amounts of money. So we've seen over the last couple of administrations where those high-ranking military officers who might take a stand in defense of the Constitution and the Republic have been encouraged to retire early, and there's been a big purge there as well. In the end, I still feel that the ultimate fate of Washington, D.C. Will be to collapse from its own rot and corruption and lies the way the former Soviet Union did, and that's the direction I'm continuing to move in.
Unfortunately, you might be right. I mean, we're certainly headed towards it.
Well, that would be the best outcome, because if you remember the fall of the Soviet Union, there was very, very little bloodshed. There was about 3 or 4 months where the people had to really deal with some hardship, and then they formed the Russian republics, and things got a lot better than they were under the former Soviet Union. Mark, I'm going to let you go here because we've got another caller who's been waiting very, very patiently, so we're going to switch over to Mike in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I can go back to, you were mentioning Hillary's rallies compared to Trump's earlier, and I was going to ask, I don't get to listen to you all the time, did you happen to see the video of her in Reno?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had a lot of people send that to me, and they're trying to say that she's in front of a green screen, and I keep replying to all these people, you can't do a green screen with an out-of-focus foreground because you will get chewing all around it. And they're all looking at this cell phone that's being held up, which seems to show an empty room. And actually it does, because what I concluded, that individual was using the camera that faces you on your phone for when you're talking on Skype and everything, and was holding it up to show that the rest of the venue was absolutely empty, because we've seen it already. Every time there's a Hillary rally, they'll shove everybody right up to the stage and then frame the shot with the cameras to make it look like there's throngs of adoring fans. And somebody will take a picture with a cell phone in the back of the room showing that most of the room is just absolutely empty, and I think that's what this guy was doing.
But there was one thing that the guy in the video didn't mention, and that was that everybody up in the bleachers, or what do you want to call bleachers, they were holding up signs. Do you remember what they had on their signs?
I don't remember. Oh, is that the one where they modified it to a liar?
No. Every sign, every place card, what do you want to call it, the people were holding up had USA. Nothing with Hillary or anything else. Only USA. Those 3 letters. That's what made it so weird, dude.
I'll have to take a look. I'll take another look at that. And, when I was sent the video, it was basically saying the crowd in the foreground was green screened, but I didn't see anything to indicate that. But it could very well be. We know there's a lot of fakery going on. One of the recent Hillary still photos, there was very obvious photoshopping going on there to amplify her crowd.
Yeah, and I would suggest that instead of 10 times or 100 times more people at Trump rallies, how about 1,000 more times?
Could very well be. I remember early in the primary season, Hillary held a rally literally in a bicycle shop, and nobody showed up at all. And she's canceled rallies. You know, when she's told there's only 30 or 40 people, she'll say, to heck with it, I don't need them. And she'll move on from there.
But not enough people to pay for the trip, man.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I don't think she's not short of money. I mean, she's got huge, vast sums of money being poured on her by Wall Street, by the military-industrial complex, by George Soros. The corruptors of our society are spending their money to corrupt our society even further with Hillary Clinton. And it's amazing when you look at how little money Donald Trump is spending on his campaign to date compared to Hillary Clinton. For him to even be tied in the polls, according to the corporate media, is an amazing statement.
Yeah, and that's why my observation is any demonstrations or complaints or people getting together should be in front of the controlled media, who's pulling the biggest con on people in this country. It's just sad.
Oh, they are, and but the good news is everybody knows they're doing it. And we're seeing the corporate media and the establishment literally tear itself apart in their efforts to put Hillary over on us.
There are still a lot of slow liberals out there, Mike.
Well, fewer and fewer of them. You know, we've got the Trumpocrat phenomenon, where Hillary just assumed that after they threatened and bought off Bernie Sanders to support her, that the Sanders voters would come over and support Hillary. They're not doing it. They're calling themselves Trumpocrats. They don't want to register as Republicans, but they're not going to vote for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. All righty. Let's see. I had one thing here. No, we'll do that on Tuesday. Let's talk about Hillary's attempt to distract from what was revealed by the DNC emails with this ridiculous assertion that Russia was behind the hack. I mean, I think they could come out with a Hillary Clinton talking doll, but it would only say one thing. Russia did it, Russia did it, Russia did it, Russia did it. And Putin has come on out and said, Russia's got more important things to do than hack into the Democrats' emails, and that this is a transparent attempt by the Hillary campaign to trick Americans into ignoring what these emails reveal about how crooked the Democratic primaries were this year. And they're trying to keep all that hidden, even to the point we were talking the other day where this class action lawsuit is moving forward on behalf of the Bernie Sanders donors who want their money back from the Democratic National Committee for the fraud that they provably committed. And when the lawyers for the class action lawsuit were being interviewed on TV outside the courthouse, there was a truck out there just beeping its horn constantly so that the interview couldn't happen. I mean, that's how childish they're getting out there. But we do need to look at the content and forget about this attempt to kill the messenger, especially given that Julian Assange has said the DNC emails did not come from Russia. He implied they came from an internal leak, Seth Rich, who is unfortunately no longer with us and cannot confirm or deny what's going on. Let's grab a quick phone call. Ed in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
I'm trying to look into those computer-assisted marital aids that you were talking about a couple weeks ago.
Why? I mean, when I was talking about those, and what a wonderful, timely topic you're bringing up here. It was my idea was this computerization of everything in our lives has gone on way, way too far.
I don't know why I was thinking about that. Mine's in the gutter today, I guess. Well, I just thought I would bring that up. I know you're talking about the Democratic situation, so I'll just peel out of here.
All right. Well, your timing is absolutely perfect because we got to take a break for commercials. So we'll be back after these few words. And Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to turn to the war zones here, and number one on the U.S. government's special high interest targets list, for the moment at least, appears to be Syria, because we now have Syria and Russia and now Turkey all coordinating inside Syria to kick out all these U.S.-backed terrorists. We're on the verge of seeing this generation's version of Vietnam. And Barack Obama does not want that as part of his legacy, but he may get stuck with it. And the only way they can turn this around is to sell the American people on the need for the U.S. to just outright invade Syria. And they've already got boots on the ground. They've declared a swath of territory saying, this is ours, you can't come in here. It's called an invasion, for those of you who aren't really clear on what's going on. And so we're already seeing more propaganda come on out. They have photos of more children claiming they were burned by napalm bombs in an airstrike that killed 25 civilians. And, of course, it's all being blamed on Assad. Assad is killing his own people. And they've been saying that all along for the last 5 years. Assad is using sarin gas on his own people. That one turned out to be a lie. They tried that one a couple of times. And this claim that Assad was behind this napalm attack on kids. And let's face it, napalm on a little kid, that's engineered to provoke shock and horror, to disconnect your higher thought processes. And it's all coming out of the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Now, for those of you who aren't picking up on this, this is a well-known pro-Syrian war propaganda operation. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is not in Syria. It's run out of a two-bedroom house in Coventry, England. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is just one guy whose day job is running a T-shirt store. But anytime the corporate media needs an authoritative report on the evils of Bashar al-Assad, this is who they'll use. It's called propaganda laundering. We're not lying to you. We got this from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, and they wouldn't lie. And everyone's picking up on it over at Zero Hedge. They've got an article where they're quoting Martin Armstrong about this shameless exploitation. Children are once again the number one tool of propaganda. We must invade Syria for the children. They're also using that one to support the refugee agenda. We have to let the children come in to Europe. And yet, most of the people pouring into Europe, they're not even from Syria. They're young males of military age. They don't have families. But anytime they're trying to get your emotions tangled up so you can't think clearly, it's always children. Like that photo they did a week ago, which turned out to be staged. Now, Amnesty International has called on the Bahraini regime to suspend its crackdown on peaceful critics and opposition figures. Good luck on that one. I don't think it's going to happen. Now, we talked about this story a while back, but we're going to repeat it. There's an 87-year-old woman in Germany. Her name is Ursula Haverbeck. And she has serious doubts about the Orthodox account of the Holocaust. And she is old enough to have actually been there in Germany when all of this was going on. And a court in Detmold has sentenced her to 8 months in jail for denying the Holocaust. 8 months in jail for an 87-year-old woman. Now, I want to point something out here. If you claim that you saw a flying saucer, and they took you up in the flying saucer and did weird sexual experiments on you with women in spandex and beehive hairdos, you don't go to jail when you make that claim. If you claim that you've seen Bigfoot, your career isn't wrecked. If you claim that Elvis and Michael Jackson are still alive, all that's going to happen is that people will chuckle at you indulgently. But if you question that official story of World War II, you are going to jail. And to me, that makes it very obvious. They've got something to hide. We've got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America, and no, the 800 number is still not working, so if you want to call into the show here, it's 512-716-1603, 512-716-1883, 512-716-1897. So with all this talk about war and Russia and all this other stuff going on here, it's time to go on back and ask the question, does the U.S. really have the necessary resources to fight such a war? Certainly doesn't have the money, doesn't have the manufacturing, doesn't have the manpower, and it certainly does not have the moral authority for all of these interventions. We've been talking about the poor quality, very costly products coming out of that military-industrial complex. And apparently, a third Freedom-class littoral combat ship has now broken down with problems with the propulsion chain. And they're saying it's going to have to be removed and rebuilt or replaced. This is coming out of military.com. We don't really make cost-effective weapons anymore. We make weapons to make profit, and we just add things on the side. I remember a couple of years ago, I was out at the air show, the military show, at Kaneohe Bay Marine Air Station, and they had this helicopter, Seahawk F, sub-hunting helicopter. And over on the port side, where all the sonobuoy tubes were located, there was this big piece of equipment that had been bolted on. And it actually blocked a lot of those sonobuoy tubes. And I was asking the flight crew, why did you put that on there? It's limiting your effectiveness. And they said, we were just told to do it. I don't even know what the device did. But it was very obvious that it compromised the ability to carry and deploy sonobuoys in chasing a submarine. It doesn't make sense, unless the goal is, of course, to generate more revenue for the defense contractors, who will then make wonderful donations to candidates for government, all at your expense. We're hearing more and more comments about the newest aircraft carrier in the American fleet, the Gerald R. Ford, about how it's basically obsolete before it ever goes to sea. And they're out there saying that with the benefit of hindsight, it may have been reckless to build this ship around so many unproven technologies. I mean, they were putting all the whiz-bang in there, magnetic catapults, which were there to allow a little bit more room on the hangar deck without having all that steam catapult stuff overhead. They had these synchronized imaging radars. They can't get those to work. An unproven propulsion system, unproven electrical system components, radar integration issues. Apparently recovery systems have got a problem. And they're out there saying that the time has come to decide if they're going to go on trying to make this thing work, or possibly strip out the hull and replace everything with more established technologies. $12.9 billion. And it's not just the United States that's fallen into this trap. The Royal Navy is deploying the HMS Daring to fight ISIS, even though that ship's reliability is in question. And it's part of a problem that the British Navy was designing ships to operate in the North Atlantic, where they can use the cold water as cooling system for their gas turbine engines. When they're operating down in the Gulf, where the water is a lot warmer, the cooling system doesn't work. The engines overheat and break. It's the more they engineer, the more fragile things become. It's amazing. All right, let's talk about the economy. The U.S. has arbitrarily expanded its anti-Russian sanctions to a whole bunch of new companies, shipbuilding, logistics companies, the Gazprom. They're just out there trying to provoke everything. And, of course, The Department of the Treasury is out there saying that they're doing this. They're sanctioning more Russian companies in the wake of the conflict in Ukraine. Of course, this conflict in the Ukraine was started by the United States. Victoria Nuland openly admitted the U.S. government spent $5 billion to topple the previous government of Ukraine and put in President Chocolate, Poroshenko. So this is how absurd this is. Go on in, create a crisis, and then say, we're going to punish you for the crisis we created. What they're trying to do is provoke Russia into doing something overt that can be used to just sell this whole war agenda. Meanwhile, Putin's spokesman is saying, okay, if you want to expand the sanctions, but remember the reciprocity principle, we're just going to sanction right back. And all of these Russian sanctions are harming Europe and the United States. Meanwhile, Russia and Iran, their trade is booming. The world is moving away from a U.S.-centric economic model. And there's not a thing they can do to switch it, because everything that they do only makes the situation worse. Reuters had a story out there, a trial balloon, about how the European Central Bank may be forced to buy stocks. They're about ready to go down the same road as the Federal Reserve, create tons and tons of new money, buy up stocks to keep the stock market looking good. But making a stock market look good is not the same thing as having a functioning economy, because you can use market forces, supply and demand, to keep stock prices high, but if the underlying worth isn't there, there's going to be a crash someplace. And the ECB could be sunk by a stock market crash if they own too much. Same thing with the Federal Reserve. All of these Wall Street firms involved in the plunge protection team here in the United States of America, they're now holding huge, huge blocks of overvalued stock. And they're stuck. They got themselves into a heck of a trap. They have to keep pumping out new created money to keep things looking good. And every time they turn on those printing presses or type some more zeros into that keyboard, it further erodes the value of the dollar. They're literally stealing purchasing power from you after you've earned it by devaluing that dollar. And at the same time, it's eroding confidence in the dollar by other countries. The only way out of this mess is a new world war, because that's what worked back in 1907 and 1929. Except it's not going to work this time, because everybody understands that's really what's driving this war agenda forward. Now, yesterday we were talking about this gold brokerage firm in Germany, Extra Gold, which is owned by Deutsche Bank, that all of a sudden is refusing to deliver the gold that has been contracted for. And the investors were told that for every paper ounce of gold that they bought and took the paper certificate home, there was a real physical ounce of gold in the vaults that they could come in and get anytime they want. You know, but you leave the gold in the vault because there it's safe from burglars and thieves and everything. Well, apparently not, because it's not there. And now we're seeing this story that came on out from goldcore.com. This problem is not limited to Deutsche Bank. Other German banks that are running gold paper trade brokers are not able to deliver gold. And a big reason for that is Germany was never able to get back all their gold from the New York Federal Reserve. See, what these gold brokerages were probably doing is the gold wasn't in their vaults, it was in the vaults at the New York Federal Reserve. But they can't get it back. And we posted a link to that History Channel show, America's Book of Secrets, the gold conspiracy episode. And if you go to that video and you start at 19 minutes and 20 seconds, it talks about what happened when Germany tried to get their gold back from the New York Federal Reserve and how they got that big stall. This is going to trigger a gold run, and that's going to send gold prices right through the roof. They're not going to be able to rig them down. And I'll tell you what the next thing is going to be, is you're going to start seeing governments order their citizens to turn in their investment gold. We'll give you lots of stacks of paper and colored ink and everything in exchange for it. But really, this paper is worth just the same thing as the gold. No, it isn't. It's a big lie. It was a lie when Roosevelt did it. a lot of people are starting to comment on the latest display of American exceptionalism, and it has to do with the growing trend of companies in Europe holding U.S. corporations to account for past accumulated tax bills. Apple just got hit with a huge one. And the attitude coming out of the U.S. government is, you're not supposed to do that. With the American companies, we're coming into your country and we're generating sales and jobs. You're not supposed to charge us taxes here. We're supposed to get favorable treatment, special privileges. And that's not really working out too well. At this particular moment here in the United States of America, there are 94,391,000 legal American citizens willing and able to work who cannot find a job, have not been able to find a job for months, if not years. This number does not include all the illegal immigrants and refugees pouring on in who also don't have jobs and immediately go on social services paid for by your tax dollars. Right now in the United States, and this is very alarming, government workers now outnumber manufacturing workers in this country by 9 million. Now, in a well-run business or a well-run economy, you go back and you look at how Japan does these things. Management should never exceed 10% of the total workforce. And here we have a country where management outnumbers the actual workforce. Because there's one thing that government likes to create, and it's more government jobs, more regulation. Those government workers pushing papers around, and I'm not trying to insult anybody personally, they're not producing anything at all that could reverse the trade imbalance, which is now over $1.5 billion every single day. They just move papers around. They're the embodiment of the service economy that they sold us all back in the 1980s. When you have more people counting the beans than actually growing the beans, you're in serious, serious trouble, and that's where we are right now. Because anybody who understands economics understands that it is the growing of the beans and not the counting of the beans on which a nation can prosper. We are already starting to see dramatic drops in rent in 10 of the top 12 U.S. markets. Everybody went on a building boom or a buying foreclosed houses boom, turn them into rental properties. There's now a glut, and it's driving rental prices down. And that means all those people who invested huge amounts of money in these new rental properties, they're going to start missing their mortgage payments, their financing. It's completely out of control because it's not being managed with an eye toward what is best for the nation as a whole. That long view, that wide view. And if there's one job that is supposed to be paying attention to what is best for the nation as a whole, it's President of the United States of America. And we haven't had a president with that overview going all the way back to Ronald Reagan. It's always the special interests, the lobbyists, the donors. We're just going to do what gets us money and power now, and I just have to tick things over until I'm out of office or I retire from the CEO position, and then it's somebody else's problem to deal with. Kick the can down the road. They've been doing that with the Federal Reserve debt for 100 years. They've kicked that can down the road so much it's looking like an old worn-out gum wrapper at this point. Over in Minnesota, they're looking at individual health insurance rates going up by more than 50%. And there's another article that goes with this. This came out of the Duluth News-Tribune, where doctors are saying because the deductibles are now so high on these Obamacare policies, people can't afford to go to the doctor at all. They can't get the tests done. They can't get the diagnoses done. They're just staying at home and hoping for the best. And so we're starting to see doctors and hospitals actually come up short. Their business is falling off. When you suck too much money out of your economy for wars, for Wall Street, for Israel, for the Clinton Foundation, you can lock the economy up, and that's what's going on right now. Apparently, Obama has just arbitrarily declared a new control board to run Puerto Rico. This has triggered protests in San Juan at this imposition of an outside ruling body. And Puerto Rico is $70 billion in debt. Everybody's in debt because the whole world is in the pocket of the private central banks. And private central banks, by design, create more debt than money with which to pay that debt. It's that old 11th marble idea. All these nations are in debt, all the people are in debt because the economic system we're using is designed to drive everybody in every nation into debt, to keep us their slaves. Now, Angela Merkel is out there insisting that she's not going to give up on that transatlantic trade and investment partnership, even though her own deputy, French minister, Austria, are saying this thing is dead because it's just the U.S. trying to bully other countries to run their economy to benefit the United States of America. And they've had enough of that. Merkel's in serious trouble. The anti-immigrant party has overtaken Merkel's CDU in the German state election poll. And the writing is on the wall. Angela Merkel was not serving the German people and the German nation. She was serving the New World Order, the globalists, Obama, and the German people are going to kick her out. As well, they should. Meanwhile, over in Italy, 13,000 migrants arrived over the space of just 4 days, overwhelming the facilities for handling this huge surge of people. Apparently, over in Germany, a man tried to burn his ex-wife alive at a refugee center, set himself on fire and died, and apparently the woman survived, but caused a huge amount of damage to the shelter that houses 14 people. Like I said, this refugee process is a filter. We're getting the worst of the people. All righty, we're coming up here on a commercial break. We got a caller waiting on the line. I'm going to take your phone call as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we take this phone call, another story breaking out of the FBI summary of the Hillary Clinton email scandal. Along with the cell phones and the iPads, apparently an entire laptop that was used to archive Hillary Clinton's emails off of her private server went missing. And even worse, it was not wiped. So, I mean, this just gets worse and worse and worse. All right, we're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to shut off the phone lines for hour number 3 because Claire's got a lot of stuff to cover. Ed in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, Mike, I got my mind out of the gutter. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. And by the way, we do have a rule, 1 call per day, okay?
Okay, but what I was getting at was, okay, now the common law trumps codes and statutes. I don't know if you know that or not.
Well, I know some of them.
But what I'm saying is the media and these politicians, they're trespassing on our property by lying to us like they are.
Yes.
And that gives us standing in a court of law. And if there was somebody out there that was well-versed enough in the common law, it would be easy to bring a lawsuit against all these people that are lying and causing harm to the American people.
Well, you have the principle of fraud under color of law that you could certainly pursue. Unfortunately, a lot of people who have tried to bring lawsuits against politicians for lying have been blindsided by the fact that politicians have argued in court that lying to the public is protected speech under the First Amendment, which we understand is utterly ridiculous. The First Amendment exists to protect the truth, not to protect lies. But the courts take the position that unless you are under oath, that lying does not carry any criminal penalties.
Okay, the lawsuit in Florida that was struck down, I forget the guy's name that was talked about it.
You're talking about Larry Klayman had the RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation.
Yes, sir. That one. Okay, now, under common law, all he had to do was include the judge in the case as part of the wrongdoer. All he had to do was include the judge as a wrongdoer, go to the next level, and that case would have got heard.
Yeah, but the problem is the American court system does not acknowledge common law. It's U.S.
It does. If you do it right, if it's done correctly, they have to.
Yeah, but as the judge in that case demonstrated, the judges just throw the stuff out if it's inconvenient to the political leadership. And as long as
it'll get thrown out at that level,
and then it'll get thrown out at the next level, and then it'll get thrown out by Loretta Lynch. I mean, we need to understand we don't have a justice system in this country anymore. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Got to take a break for station identification. Back with the lovely Lady Claire after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, third hour here. And for those of you on BAM User TV, this gorgeous creature sitting behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, who will grace us third hour of our Friday show. We're going to turn the phone lines off here because Claire has got a lot of stuff to get on through. And so, Claire, what are you starting with?
I am starting with the information we received this week that the Homeland Security Department is going to declare the elections part of its critical infrastructure. And there was a very interesting article by Max Slavo today in the Hit the Fan. Homeland Security could steal what she can't win. And with this announcement, it's very clear, Mike, that there will not be a fair election, and our leaders will again be selected for us.
Well, that's what they're going to try to do, but if, even Soros is saying Trump is going to win the popular vote by a landslide, and any shenanigans to try and reverse that could easily trigger a violent uprising in this country. And but what the Department of Homeland Security is doing, first of all, Obama has to convince America this November's election is honest and fair and trustworthy, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Second, the Department of Homeland Security is being put around the election system to limit people being able to go on in and say, we want to do a recount, we want to see what's in those electronic voting machines, check the dangling chads for anybody who's still using that. And so they're trying to basically make it less transparent and assure us that it's absolutely trustworthy and you can't prove we cheated, therefore you have to do what we tell you. And that, of course, is nonsense. The burden of proof is on the government to prove that they won the election honestly and fairly. And if they can't do it, then we're not obligated to obey their orders. We're not obligated to pay their bills. We are certainly not obligated to sacrifice life and limb of our children in their wars of conquest.
Right. And there are some scenarios that I see potentially happening starting maybe the 9th of November. There could be violent protests in the streets of this country if people think that the election was stolen from Trump. Now, I always encourage calm, and I never endorse violence, because violence is what federal and state officials are prepared to stop, and with what they call an extreme prejudice, as in shoot to kill. Now, although Hillary may attain the position of President of the United States, it could be that any one of the several mysterious illnesses plaguing her could potentially put her into a situation where Article 25 would have to be invoked.
Amendment 25 there, and then 25. Tim Payne would be in the Oval Office. And, going on back to this idea about a mass uprising, as you know, actor Gene Wilder recently passed away, very, very brilliant man. And one of, I think, the most favorite movie that he was in was Young Frankenstein, and there's that one scene with the police chief out there saying, a riot is an ugly thing, and I think it's just about time that we had one.
Yeah, I remember that. It's also possible, because of the spectacular epic fail of President Obama's economic policies, including the cold, hard reality that there are over 94 million Americans who can't find jobs. But, of course, these people are not counted by the Bureau of Labor Statistics because they've been out of work too long. There could be a massive stock market crash followed by massive social unrest leading to the implementation of martial law. I don't know, Mike, what November 9th is going to bring to this country. But if these elections are seen as crookedly stolen from Trump, all heck could break loose. And you know something, sweetheart? I am so grateful right now that we live on Oahu. You know, the Hawaiian people are generally not prone to riots. And they tend to be very peaceful, aloha people. So I'm kind of glad we're here right now, frankly.
Well, I'm glad that we're here, but on the other hand, you've got this situation that if Obama or Hillary starts a real war with Russia and China, we're going to get hit here. Pearl Harbor's right out the window. And even without nukes, you know, it'll get hit with bombs and cruise missiles and everything. So
it's
get the popcorn out.
Yeah, it just doesn't look great coming to the end of 2016. I'd like to move on to the secret global court. White corporate criminals and corrupt politicians desperately want the TPP to get passed in this coming lame duck session. Obama needs to ensure that he'll get well compensated after leaving office for a job well done, protecting, defending, and further enriching the global oligarch class.
Oligarch,
thank you. That is why he's being so adamant about passing the TPP during the upcoming lame duck session of Congress, when he knows representatives who will no longer face re-election might be coerced or bribed into voting for this monumental public betrayal.
Well, there's only one problem with that.
Yeah.
You have all of the counterparties to this so-called free trade agreement. And by the way, if trade is free, you don't need an agreement.
Yeah.
But you've already got, Europe is turning its back on the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Much of Asia is turning their back on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They can pass whatever law they want in the Congress, but if they don't have an agreement from these other countries, it's null and void. What is the U.S. going to do? Say, we have now declared this treaty in effect for the whole world, and
by
we will...
fiat.
By imperial edict, and we will bomb you if you don't go along with what the rules that we just made up.
And it isn't really what one would call a fair trade deal. It's a way for global oligarchs to consolidate, to grow, and protect their enormous wealth.
And and basically suborn national sovereignty and civilian government to the interests of the multinational corporations. We have to do a little shout-out here to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining the network. We are sitting here with the lovely Lady Claire. The phone lines are off for this hour because Claire has a lot of things to go through. And we're talking about Obama is still out there pushing for these transoceanic trade agreements, even though the counterparties in Europe and Asia are saying this is really not a good idea.
Yeah, and what this will do is earn money by scouring the world for potential ISDS opportunities, then speculating on them. Now, Mike, to me, the interesting question, which, by the way, nobody seems to be asking Obama on this, is why is the TPP including countries which still allow slave and child labor and human trafficking?
Because they make money.
You know, isn't that sort of counter to every value we allegedly hold dear as Americans? Come on.
The government clings to these values for political speeches, but if you look at what the U.S. government's been doing in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and Yemen, it's just pure air. We're living, unfortunately, underneath a government that is routinely committing war crimes, use of torture, use of banned chemical weapons against civilian populations. There is no evil or crime this government has not already committed.
I hear you, and what I'm noticing in Obama's insistent push on this, he is demonstrating again that he is just as beholden to his corporate cronies as are the Republicans, and that he considers American workers utterly irrelevant. I don't like that.
Well, I don't like it either, but we're seeing more and more Americans understand that Republicans and Democrats are just two faces of the same corruption, and probably most Americans are unaware that most Americans, the majority of American voters, no longer identify with being Republican or Democrat. Those are actually minority positions now.
I can't. I call myself, I'd like to be a thoughtful independent, a logic-looking for independent. That's, I think, what I am right now. What about you?
Well, having studied the Republicans and the Democrats for a lot of years now, anarchy's looking very attractive to me right now.
I can understand how that might work. I would like to talk about a chart that appeared in Zero Hedge, which is a very, very sober, very intelligent blog that I like to link to. And it says, "What the heck chart of the day? U.S. factory orders tumble for the longest streak in history." And Mike, these have been declining for 21 months since October 2014, the end of QE3. And this is the longest period of decline in U.S. history since 1956, and has always indicated that the U.S. economy is in a recession, if not a depression. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the recession is continuing. I don't think there was ever a recovery. It's just something the politicians are saying to keep us docile and tranquil and from rising up. But it's like talking about that Korean shipping line going out of business,
Hanjin, yes.
the Baltic Dry Index. When you suck all of the wealth out of the population and you take away the jobs by which they can earn new wealth, the economy is going to lock up, and that's exactly what's going on. The American people don't have money to go down to the store and buy things other than what they need for their immediate survival, and it's led to this retail crisis. We're seeing iconic stores in serious trouble. If Sears just borrowed $300 million to fund itself through the holiday shopping season, and if they don't have a good holiday shopping season, and they won't, we're probably going to see Sears disappear.
Yeah, I can't imagine that they. I think that they're going to default on that loan, Michael. I don't know if there is any way they're going to be able to recoup, no matter what they do.
I would agree with you on that one.
Yeah. I know that you've talked about it a little bit earlier in the show, but I would like to talk a little bit about the FBI report on Clinton email investigation.
There is so much juicy stuff there.
Yes, there is.
Yes.
And I think you probably mentioned that large portions of it have been redacted.
Yes.
Yes. And in July, FBI Director James Comey announced that he did not recommend charging Clinton with willfully mishandling classified information. And he called the former Secretary of State extremely careless, and that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case. Now,
because they don't want to wind up dead in Fort Marcy Park here.
That's a reasonable reason. Yeah, that would be a motivator. And I have to ask our listeners and viewers, do Americans want or need a presidential candidate who has been characterized as extremely careless by the head of the FBI? She also was recently described by Huma Abedin, her closest aide, as often confused.
Yes.
So, folks, do we really want a president of the United States who is both extremely careless and, and often confused?
And to add to that, the revelation out of the FBI summary that Hillary told her FBI interviewers she didn't remember getting the security briefing on how to handle classified documents because of her concussion. So we can add forgetful to that list. Everything they're coming out with to try and protect Hillary legally is painting a picture of somebody who is simply not suited to be in that Oval Office.
Yeah. There was an article, I'm moving kind of across the board here, from Global Research. It's out of Canada, and again, a pretty sober and responsible resource. Mumia Abu-Jamal's health is now precarious, and his motion for immediate medical care has been denied. Federal Judge Robert Marniani has denied the preliminary injunction motion in Abu-Jamal versus Carestes that demanded life-saving hepatitis C treatment for Mumia Abu-Jamal.
Well, basically, Mumia is a serious embarrassment to the U.S. government because the evidence is he was framed for a crime he did not commit. So they just want him to go away. They did exactly the same thing to James Earl Ray, who was jailed for the assassination of Martin Luther King on the basis of a single coerced confession, which he immediately retracted. And then evidence began to surface that the gun that had shot Martin Luther King was not the gun found on James Earl Ray, and he was ill in prison, and the courts just stalled and stalled. They wouldn't let the guns be retested until James Earl Ray passed away. And I'm sure they're thinking exactly the same thing about the Leonard Peltier, the Native American activist.
Same thing.
The embarrassments have to go away.
And stay gone away.
Yes.
And I think it's going to be really tragic and unfortunate, but I see this gentleman dying in prison. Hep C is a very dangerous illness, and they do have some very advanced treatments for it that appear, and I think they've just been let onto the market to actually clear this problem up. But it's obvious the U.S. government wants the guy dead.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
What's next on your list?
Next on my list, sometimes you just can't make this stuff up. Retired general has called Israel the world champion of occupation, and he has sparked outrage in the country. And his former Central Command Major General, Gadi Shamni, and he characterized Israel as bringing occupation to an art form, which angered politicians on the right Wednesday no end. He was speaking at the Interdisciplinary Center Herzliya, and he talked about his time in charge of Central Command when he was responsible for the West Bank, and describing himself as the occupation general, with a bit of pride, I might add. We are world champions of occupation, and we brought it into an art form. But we have to ask ourselves, is this what we want to be?
Well, you need to understand that there are international laws governing the behavior of an occupying power, which Israel has completely ignored.
Yeah.
And what Israel is doing is basically a very slow-motion invasion and conquest of the West Bank. And they're saying it's an occupation, but it doesn't meet the legal definition of an occupation.
Yeah.
And Israel just authorized another, 400 housing units and illegal settlements in the West Bank?
I think it was 450, honey.
450.
450, yeah.
And, Israel is just stealing things and acting like, well, if you say we're stealing things, you're an anti-Semite. There was that story where the international courts had ordered Israel to pay Iran billions for all the oil Iran has been sending to Israel all this time, and Israel's attitude was, no, we appreciate the oil, but Iran is our enemy, they're anti-Semites, they're the Nazis, we refuse to pay the money. And I don't think Israel understands how this looks to the rest of the world, where most people think that when you buy something, you pay for it.
Yeah, I agree. There is a lot of hubris in the thinking of the Israeli government. And if I remember correctly, my classic Greek mythology, hubris was what was always getting the so-called heroes into deep kimchi, into deep trouble.
Yes.
Thinking that they could do things and there would be zero consequences for them.
Whom the gods would destroy, they first make proud.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of a mess. Another article that I wanted to bring forward in a topic. Apparently, U.S. arms makers are very much gung-ho for investing in a new Cold War. And the reality is the U.S. military has only won a single major war since the end of World War II, and that was the Gulf War of 1991.
Oh, don't forget Grenada.
Oh, can't forget Grenada.
That was a hot weekend.
But U.S. military contractors continue to win major budget wars in Congress nearly every year. And you have to consider the steady march to victory of the biggest single weapons program in history, the planned purchase of the advanced Lockheed Martin F-35 jets by the Army, Navy, and Marines at a total collective cost of more than $1 trillion.
And I love what the Marines are doing. They're saying, this thing's got problems. We're just going to put it into combat and see what breaks, and then we'll know what we need to fix.
And hype doesn't win wars.
No, it doesn't. And again, with all these other disasters that are out there, the Gerald R. Ford, 3 of the Freedom-class littoral combat ships, drivetrain problems, the Independence-class littoral combat ships, serious corrosion problems. We're spending huge amounts of money, your money, and we're not getting bang for the buck. I mean, they all look good at air shows. In fact, at the moment, showing up at air shows is the only thing the F-35 is actually good for.
That it can do.
Yeah, it looks really good sitting on the runway,
But, and you probably noticed the very intense demonization of Russia recently. And as Li Fang observed recently in The Intercept, the escalating anti-Russian rhetoric in the U.S. presidential campaign comes in the midst of a major push by military contractors to position Moscow as a potential enemy that must be countered with a drastic increase in military spending by NATO countries. Thus, the Lockheed-funded Aerospace Industries Association is warning that the Obama administration is failing to spend enough on aircraft, ship, and ground combat systems to adequately address Russian aggression on NATO's doorstep.
Yeah, but there's two problems with that.
Yep.
First of all, there's no more money out here for the government to grab and spend on weapons. And I'll give you the second reason after we come back from these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about how the military-industrial complex in this country, which, by the way, remember, when President Eisenhower stepped down from office, his farewell address, he said, you watch out for these guys.
Yep.
Because they will co-opt the government and just use it to suck all the wealth out of the nation, put it in their pockets. And you need to go back and look at, for example, his Cross of Iron speech. Now, we've been talking about the probability that our U.S. government is going to basically collapse the way the former Soviet Union did. And one of the factors that led to the collapse of the former Soviet Union was an emphasis on military spending over the needs of their own people. And the Soviet Union literally bankrupted itself trying to keep up with the United States military spending. Well, the situation is reversed now because Russia and China are very smart about their weapons development program. They're making weapons to make weapons, not to make people rich.
Right.
And right now, when you look at the capability of our weapons and their cost versus those coming out of Russia and China, the U.S. is the one who is now spending enough money to bankrupt itself trying to keep up with the weapons coming out of Russia and China.
And the fact that the warmongers in the military-industrial complex are driving U.S. foreign policy hasn't been a secret for a long time. But unfortunately, that Cold War, after which they seem to be lusting right now, could very quickly turn into a hot war around the world in places like South China Sea, Ukraine, Syria, and beyond. And Mike, to me, the F-35 is symptomatic of everything that is completely wrong with the U.S. government weapons procurement program and demonstrates painfully clearly the incestuous relationship between weapons manufacturers and those congressional representatives who greenlight their contracts, yet get heavy election contributions from the same weapons manufacturers.
Absolutely, and the Pentagon is just as much tangled up because all these weapons procurement officers in the Pentagon, they hold investments in the weapons companies.
Yeah.
When they do their 20 in the military services and they qualify for their government pension, they're then hired by the defense contractors as consultants.
Revolving door.
And they get incredibly rich. And again, I've mentioned this before. There's a book and a very wonderful movie called The Pentagon Wars about the development of the Bradley Infantry Fighting Vehicle. And it's based on a true story about just how it's all driven by money, and they don't even care if the weapons really work. And for those of you who are AR-15 enthusiasts, another example goes back to Vietnam, when the Army was starting to consider a replacement for their standard infantry rifle, and it came down to the M16 versus the M14. And the military brass was pushing for the M14, theoretically because it used the same ammunition as the machine guns, which would simplify logistics. But the reality was they were invested with the company making that rifle. And in order to try and force the contract in that direction, they literally sabotaged the field trials of the M16 by putting the wrong propellant into the ammunition, which got a lot of our kids killed in Vietnam because their guns were jamming. And Congress was finally forced to investigate, and they discovered this attitude by the Pentagon brass that it was okay to kill off a few more of our kids as long as the stocks were going to be performing. And Congress intervened, and that's why the M16 became the standard infantry weapon, and its derivatives have, of course, become a major player in arms all around the world. And the AR in AR-15 stands for the Armalite Company, which was the company that originally designed this weapon system, which was then acquired, I think, by Colt, has it now.
Yeah, I think so. Unfortunately, this much-challenged F-35 could well prove the U.S. military's Waterloo if deployed without getting these engineering deficits sorted in short order. And, Mike, let me tell you what I think, and I know it's only going to happen when pigs fly. Lockheed Martin should pay for their own fixes out of their own pockets, having gouged the American taxpayer for a fighter jet that way over budget and dysfunctional.
Well, it's never going to happen.
I know that.
It's never going to happen.
That's why I said when pigs fly.
That money has already vanished into various, bank accounts in the Cayman Islands.
Yep.
From the point of view of the military contractors, they don't care if what they produce is junk. Their kids aren't going to be using it. And if it requires fixes, like we're already hearing the Gerald R. Ford may have to be completely redesigned, the taxpayers pick up the bill. Got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we go back to the Lady Claire here, Business Insider is now reporting that Hillary is starting to lose support within her own group of supporters. The opinions are turning against her. She no longer has the majority of women ready to vote for her. She's losing support among Hispanics and blacks, Hispanics, and women. That was Hillary's entire campaign. Yeah, was pandering to those. And one of the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement came on out and said, what she's saying sounds great. We have no reason to think she'll ever keep her promises. Hillary's constant pandering to the so-called vagina vote is coming up short when people look at Hillary's own personal history of dealing with Bill Clinton's victims of sexual assault. And so she's in serious trouble. And it's amazing to see the establishment media, the government, the bankers still trying to prop her up. In an honest and fair election, she wouldn't even be a candidate. Bernie Sanders would be the Democratic nominee because they went back and they looked at all the fraud in the Democratic primaries and discovered that enough of those delegates had been stolen that if they were reassigned where they should have gone, Bernie Sanders would be the nominee. So it's almost a joke how they are trying to push Hillary onto us over Donald Trump. All right, what is your next story?
The other speech.
Other speech,
yes. Hillary the Hawk spreads her wings. Did she threaten to attack Russia? And this was to a military group. And toward the end of her speech, Hillary bared her fangs and gave us an indication of what life is really going to be like under the Clinton restoration, while claiming that she'll only use military force as a last resort, the typical rhetoric of warmongers. She hinted at what the future holds. She said, you've seen the reports. Russia's hacked into a lot of things. China's hacked into a lot of things. Russia even hacked into the Democratic National Committee, maybe even some state election systems. So we've got to step up our game. Make sure we are well defended and able to take the fight to those who go after us. As president, I will make it clear that the United States will treat cyber attacks just like any other attack. We will be ready with serious political, economic, and military responses. So, Mike, let me get this straight. The woman who did not even password protect her emails is on a mission to attack Russia for allegedly hacking into the DNC servers?
And there's no evidence Russia did it.
Yeah.
Assange said it wasn't Russia.
Yeah.
Assange has implied that it was an inside leak from Seth Rich, who is sadly no longer with us to confirm or deny.
Yeah.
And you can see what a dangerous precedent she's setting. Of being able to say, China just hacked our computers and let's launch a nuclear attack. I mean, it's certainly a lot more easy to start a war that way than the Gleiwitz deception.
Yeah.
But that's exactly where she's going with this. She wants to be able to say, this country attacked our computer systems, we're going to declare war on them. And again, this is coming from a government that has not been able to find any of these ransomware writers. The cyber criminals, the people pouring Viagra ads into our mailboxes. Claire just got hit with a phishing attack.
Yep.
The government can't find any of those people, but we're supposed to take their word that they know that Russia and China are behind all these things to a certainty demanding a military response.
Yeah. And the thing we have to remember about Hillary Clinton is that she is owned by the neocons, the military-industrial complex, the banks, and Wall Street. Now, what do all these entities have in common? They profit like heck from war.
And Hillary never met a conflict she didn't like.
Oh, no.
Look at her record as Secretary of State, backing ISIS and al-Qaeda in Syria, setting up that consulate to be destroyed to try and destroy the records of the gun running. Her entire office, term in office as Secretary of State, was intervention after intervention after intervention after intervention. And if you are an American who is just as sick and tired of all this war and bloodshed and death for the sake of a fast buck, we have got to stop Hillary Clinton from getting that White House, from stealing the White House. There's no way she can be elected to it. Even Soros is saying Trump's going to win the popular vote in a landslide, but he's out there saying we're going to rig it so Hillary gets to be the president. What is he going to? Is Soros openly out there saying that he's going to fund an assassination of Donald Trump before the election?
I don't know, but reading the subtext, one can't bet against it, unfortunately. And for someone like Hillary Clinton, the excuse for the war doesn't matter as much. It's that the war is achieved by any means with which she and the people around her think they can sell such a war to the American public. But, Michael, it comes to me that the American public has become pretty doggone war-weary and war-skeptical, having been fed the lies that Saddam Hussein possessed WMDs, and I don't think that the American people are going to be so quick to sign off on yet another war.
Well, we haven't been very quick to sign off on the ones we've already got. The American people are overwhelmingly opposed to any more war. They're held in place. They're held obedient by this fiction that these people starting these wars somehow represent the democratic choice of leadership of the American people. And if they steal the election from Donald Trump the way they did from Bernie Sanders, the American people are going to say, this is not my government. I refuse to obey them. I refuse to pay their bills. I refuse to sacrifice the life and limb of my children to a bunch of people who should not be there in the first place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would very strongly caution Hillary's handlers to not allow her to go down this road toward a war against Russia if she steals this election, because the results of such a war could be both horrific and irreversible.
I do not think the United States can prevail in a war against Russia and China, even if they go to the nuclear weapons. And that's where we are. I mean, I know people in the government are running around saying, we've never lost a war. I mean, we pretend Vietnam didn't happen, but we've never lost a war. The qualifier there is we didn't exactly win all these other wars. We were on the winning side, but contrary to the propaganda movies you get out of Hollywood, America didn't win World War I single-handedly. It didn't win World War II single-handedly. Going into World War III, I mean, what was that quote Winston Churchill said? All World War III is going to do is make the rubble bounce.
I think so, yeah. That sounds Churchillian, certainly. I'd like to move over to the Middle East with something that from Sputnik. And apparently, the U.S. trained militants that formed the core of Daesh. A top Daesh leader with a $3 million bounty from the U.S. State Department on his head received counterterrorism training in the United States for 11 years, CNN reported. In an interview with Sputnik, Dr. Alan Ben-Mir, political analyst, told Radio Sputnik that the Kalimov case is not isolated. And according to this guy, U.S. trained militants formed the core of what is now known as Daesh. You know, Mike, I can remember a comic strip called Pogo.
Yes.
And there was one little episode where the writer said, we have met the enemy, and he is us. Looking at the way the U.S. government has been training people who are allegedly our enemies, the statement would be, we have met the enemy because we have trained him.
Well, what's going on here is all tyrannies, in order to control their people, must have an enemy that they can scare them with. In the 1950s and the 1960s, it was the commies. The commies are going to get you if you don't do what we tell you. And then the Soviet Union collapsed, and the U.S. was left without an enemy. to declare war on. So we had the war on drugs and the war on poverty and the war on dangling participles and the war on and now they want to go back to that Cold War so that they can wag Russians at us and we will give them our money and our obedience and the life and limb of our children. But it isn't going to work because we've been down that road before. And if you've read 1984 by George Orwell, he wrote it as a warning to our generation that governments will create the enemies they need to keep us under their control.
But these guys seem to be the Emmanuel Goldsteins of the 21st century, right?
That's exactly what they are.
And the government wants Americans to be spewing their 15 minutes of hate and buy the narrative that the U.S. government has to do something about it.
Well, it's supposed to be a 2-minute hate, but I guess in these inflationary times, So.
2 minutes. Okay, 15 minutes. And I would like our readers and listeners to please not be deceived. The deep government, the banks, and military-industrial complex in the U.S. want perpetual war and will do anything to achieve that end.
And this goes back to that project for the New American Century in the 1990s, and they've come on out with a new version, they've rebranded, but the agenda is the same, a century of unending war to leave the United States in control of the globe.
Right, and that it winds up almost always being your sons and daughters getting slaughtered or maimed for life is completely irrelevant to them. They and their propagandists always wrap these wars in a pretty little flag as though this country's soldiers are really fighting for democracy, honor, and the American way of life. But folks, I'm going to tell you a hard truth, and I hate to have to say it, but this is just the reality. At the end of the day, war is always about which countries and corporations control the world's resources and in which currencies those resources will be sold. That's all it is.
Well, in a way, our troops are fighting for the American way of life as long as you understand what the American way of life is really all about. And it's not mom and apple pie and
I hear you.
Summers down at the band shell and everything. It's about war and conquest. The U.S. is a warmongering nation. How you tell what people really want is you look at where they spend their money. And when you look at the spending habits of the U.S. government, it's always spending for war. It's always spending on the machinery of death. And the more they spend on war, the less they have to spend on you. And that's one of the reasons our nation is so deteriorated now.
Yeah. I'd like to move over to Russia and Crimea. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on Putin's bridge to Crimea. There are companies now building a multi-billion-dollar bridge to link the Russian mainland with annexed. They use the word annexed here, and that's just...
I was about to challenge you on that.
No. I've got some information after. A project close to the heart of President Putin. And they were targeted by the U.S. in an updated sanctions blacklist on Thursday. The U.S. Department of Treasury added dozens of people and companies to the list, first introduced after Russia, again the word annexed the Crimean Peninsula from Ukraine in 2014 and expanded over its support for separatist rebels in the east of the country, as well as multiple subsidiaries of Russian gas giant Gazprom. The Treasury names 7 companies directly involved in the construction of the 11.8-mile road and rail connection across the Kerch state, dubbed Putin's Bridge by some Russians. This article came out of Reuters, and I have to wonder precisely when Reuters got so sloppily fast and loose with the truth. I mean,
they always have been.
Yeah.
I mean, Reuters is to print media what CNN is to television. One source of controlled news that everybody is tapping into. And again, Russia did not annex Crimea.
I've kind of got a timeline for that.
All right, give us the timeline.
And apparently, Reuters has decided that it's simply better off just regurgitating the U.S. government's narrative. Now, here's how things went down. Yanukovych, the legitimately elected president of Ukraine, was ousted by a pro-Western coup in 2014. And the U.S. government aided and abetted this coup. Poroshenko was then elected as president of Ukraine. Now, this billionaire has not got a squeaky clean past and has a reputation for indulging in business practices maybe a little bit more crooked than a dog's hind leg. Weapons, prostitution, drugs, these are things that Poroshenko is associated with. At the moment when Poroshenko was elected, Crimean officials realized that there was no legitimate government in Ukraine. They therefore held a referendum as to whether they wanted to stay with Ukraine or petition the Russian Federation to join. In an observer-vetted, free and fair election, the Crimeans voted to petition the Russian Federation to allow Crimea to join it. Russia then accepted both Crimea and Sevastopol as members of the Russian Federation, and the treaties were signed. Now, Mike, neither Russia nor Crimea did anything wrong here. In fact, the Crimean referendum and subsequent joining of the Russian Federation is enshrined in the documents of the UN, which champions peaceful self-determination.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights,
Yep.
which, by virtue of being a member of the United Nations, the U.S. is supposed to comply with, grants all people the right to self-determination. And that's driven right from our Declaration of Independence, that when the government is not doing what it's supposed to be doing for the people, you have a right to alter or abolish it or just skedaddle. And Russia did not annex Crimea. They're trying the big lie tactic here.
Yeah,
They're just going to say annex in the hope that you'll just get tired and say, all right, Russia annexed it. Okay, go kill them and everything.
And what really annoys me here, for the U.S. State Department to continue punishing and demonizing Russia and Russian companies for something they didn't do is ham-fistedly, pig-headedly, and pig-ignorant stupid. Do they really think that Americans are that dumb that they're going to fall for this stuff?
We're going to get a lot of emails from pigs that you just
I know. I just
associating
insulted them. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, they're
pigs.
hoping that the American people are going to be dumb enough to fall for it. But again, a lot of these people who are behind all this propaganda, these are people who go back to the old Cold War, the 1950s and the 1960s, when communication was simply the government would tell the media what to tell you, the media would tell it to you, and anybody who had contradictory information basically was isolated. But that was then and this is now. And the availability of the Internet and the independent media has fundamentally transformed how information flows through society. And a lot of these old guard Cold War fossils are a little late picking up on just how important and profound that change really is.
Oh, and by the way, one last blow to the lie that the putsch in Ukraine was not sponsored by the U.S. Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland said publicly that the U.S. had spent over $5 billion, with a B, dollars to destabilize the Ukrainian regime, to subvert Ukraine, if you will. So, Reuters, I hope I've cleared this up for you, but simply put, enabling DC's lies by not doing your fact-checking doesn't cut it anymore. And continuing to lie for the U.S. government is fast making you completely irrelevant.
Absolutely.
And irrelevance has a way of making things and companies obsolete, sort of like the dribble glass and the whoopee cushion, which have long passed from the American scene. So, if this is the future you want to see for Reuters, please just continue doing what you're doing.
All right, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to Claire here, a reminder that Monday will be a rebroadcast. Our overworked and underpaid technical staff is taking Labor Day off, as they richly deserve.
Yes.
And then Tuesday, we're going to be back here live and screaming at Vonage over the toll-free number. So what is your next story?
Well, apparently, congressional Democrats have called on the FBI to investigate their political adversaries' wait for it, Kremlin ties. Leading House Democrats on Tuesday sent a letter to FBI Director James Comey, which they promptly published, asking the agency to investigate whether the Trump campaign and the Russian government have entered into a joint plot to interfere with the U.S. presidential election. Although the House Democrats say they don't know whether such a conspiracy with Moscow exists, they say that serious questions have been raised, specifically about whether Trump supporters worked in tandem with Kremlin agents to hack Democratic Party computer systems, and about overt and covert actions by the Trump campaign officials on behalf of Russian interests. Now, folks, I need to take a pause here. Why has it become disloyal to criticize U.S. foreign policy or advocate for a better relationship with Russia? I would like to see both of those things happen. Thank you very much. Did I just wake up to the suspension of the Constitution and Bill of Rights where free speech in this country is no longer protected. And folks, here's what's going on. McCarthyism has just reinserted its ugly head into American politics, courtesy of Hillary Clinton's campaign. This is absolute desperation on the cusp of madness. But, Michael, it's all they've got, looking at
it is all they've got.
The epic fails of the Obama administration.
You weren't here during the first hour where I was talking about where they're trying to imply that Melania Trump may have been a sex worker, which, fine, you know. But I pointed out this old story where Lyndon Johnson accused his opponent in a congressional race of having sex with farm animals, knowing it wasn't true, but in order to get him to deny it. And that's just what this is about.
Yeah.
There is absolutely, first of all, there's no proof Russia was behind any of these hacks. And this letter that they've put on out there is to be broadcast in the media to try and demonize Trump as in league with Russia. And the fact that there's no evidence to support it, it's just a smear job. It's just a classic political smear job. And I think, given that Hillary is losing support among her core constituencies, blacks, Hispanics, the vagina vote, screaming Russia, 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 that's all she's got left. But the American people, they're not going to respond to it. Those of us who are old enough to remember the Cold War of the 50s and 60s, we know it was a fraud to loot us of our money and give it to the military-industrial complex. And the younger generation has grown up without the benefit of that public school propagandizing to brainwash them into wetting themselves when they hear the word Russian. So they're not going to get the traction with it. And, well, there's the music. Okay, it's time for us to get on out of here and batten down to the coming hurricane. We'll be back live on Tuesday next week. Have a good Labor Day weekend. Please remember you are all part of the independent media. Take what you learn here, share it with everyone that you know. We'll be back on Tuesday. Aloha, America.